We've been taught that star forts were strictly for 17th century defense, but that official explanation collapses the moment you examine the physics. Why would a primitive society construct perfect geometric harmonics, which modern engineers struggle to replicate, just to absorb cannon fire? Even more disturbing is the physical evidence of the mud flood. Massive first-floor windows opening directly into deep soil, proving these structures were buried, not built this way. Between 1780 and 1850, the name Tartaria was systematically erased from global archives to hide this reality. We didn't build this advanced infrastructure, we inherited it. These were likely power nodes for a global grid, and once you recognize the scars in your own city's layout, you will never look at a map the same way again. I didn't start this investigation looking for a global conspiracy. I was just looking for a map. I wanted to understand why a star fortress in the north of the Netherlands looks mathematically identical to one in northern Japan, two cultures that, according to our mainstream timeline, shouldn't have been sharing complex architectural blueprints in the 1600s. We are told these are bastion forts. We are told they were designed solely to deflect cannonballs, but look closer. If you were building a bunker to survive a siege, would you design it with the delicate fractal precision of a snowflake? Would you waste millions of tons of stone creating sacred geometry that is only visible from the sky, hundreds of years before the invention of the airplane? The official story says these pointed walls were to eliminate blind spots for archers and cannons. But the physics doesn't add up. The angles are too sharp. The masonry is often too ornate, featuring non-functional towers and arches that would shatter under the first impact of heavy artillery. And then there is the stone itself. If you walk up to the walls of Sacsayhuaman, or the star forts of St. Petersburg, or the massive foundations in Osaka, you run into a material science impossibility. We are told these granite blocks, some weighing up to 40 tons, were quarried, transported on wooden rollers, and lifted with hemp ropes. But look at the seams. There are no chisel marks. There is no mortar. The stones are fitted together with such molecular precision that you cannot fit a razor blade between them. In many cases, the stone curves around corners in a single continuous piece. You cannot cut granite like that with copper or iron chisels. It crumbles. It fractures. The only way to achieve this shape is if the stone was soft when it was placed. This brings us to the geopolymer reality. The builders of the star forts didn't cut stone. They poured it. They possessed a chemical understanding of geology that allowed them to create artificial limestone and granite that is harder and more durable than the natural rock we mine today. We find evidence of this in the microscopic air bubbles trapped inside ancient megaliths, bubbles that only occur in liquid mixtures, not in sedimentary rock. If they could print rock like we print plastic, the construction of thousands of star forts worldwide wasn't a centuries-long struggle of slave labor. It was an industrial process of rapid deployment. They weren't carving out the world, they were terraforming it. Something happened in the mid-19th century. A line was drawn in the sand of history. Before 1850, maps openly depicted a massive, unified civilization spanning the northern hemisphere. After 1850, that landmass was carved up, renamed, and the star cities located within it were relabeled as isolated military outposts. They want you to believe these were disparate forts built by warring nations. But the evidence suggests they were nodes in a single, unified system, a machine that covered the earth, which was turned off, dug out, and repurposed by the people who inherited the ruins. And the smoking gun isn't in a hidden library. It's right here, under our feet. If you open the first edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, published in Edinburgh in 1771, you will find a massive country described in detail. It wasn't a myth. It wasn't a rumor. It was a geopolitical reality. Tartary, a vast country in the northern parts of Asia, bounded by Siberia on the north and the west. This is called Great Tartary. How do you lose a continent? Between 1780 and 1850, something impossible happened in the printing houses of London, Paris, and Philadelphia. A coordinated effort began to erase the largest nation on Earth from public consciousness. First, they split it. Maps from the early 1800s start labeling it Independent Tartary and Chinese Tartary. Then, by the mid-19th century, the name disappears entirely. It is absorbed into the Russian Empire and China without a single major recorded war of conquest that fits the scale of such a territory. Think about the logistics of that lie. To erase a nation that spanned from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean requires more than just ink. It requires the destruction of libraries. It requires the burning of census records. It requires a reset of the population's memory. And what happened to the cities of this lost empire? Did they vanish too? No, they were renamed. We are told that St. Petersburg was built in a swamp by Peter the Great in the early 1700s, costing hundreds of thousands of lives. But look at the engravings from before Peter's arrival. The complex star forts, the massive granite embankments, they were already there. They didn't build these cities from scratch. They dug them out. They claimed them. And then they wrote a history book that said, "We did this." The star forts we see in Europe, in America, in India, they aren't independent military bases. They are the surviving anchor points of the Tartarian power grid, the physical infrastructure of a civilization that was unified before the Great Reset of the 1800s. They call it the cultural layer. Historians tell us that over centuries, dust and dirt simply accumulate, raising the street level inch by inch. They say our ancestors just paved over their ground floors. But look at this. Why would a master architect in the 1800s design a window that looks directly into the soil? Why would they build intricate, arched doorways that are half swallowed by the pavement? If you go into these basements, you don't find rough foundations. You find full ceiling heights. You find ornamental brickwork. You find fireplaces underground. This isn't a cultural layer. This is a catastrophe. From Seattle to St. Petersburg, from Omaha to Rome, we see the exact same anomaly. Entire city blocks where the ground level suddenly rose by 10 to 15 feet in the mid-19th century. The official story is that they raised the streets to install sewage systems. Really? In every major city on Earth, simultaneously using horse and cart technology. They lifted every building or buried every first floor just for pipes? The evidence suggests a massive inundation of soil, a liquefaction event, or a mud flood that buried the lower levels of this worldwide civilization. But the mud isn't the only thing burying the truth. There is a silence in the photographic record that is even more deafening. Look at the earliest daguerreotypes types of our major cities: Moscow, Paris, London, San Francisco, taken between 1840 and 1860. The architecture is complete. The streets are paved. The cathedrals soar hundreds of feet into the air. But where are the people? Mainstream historians dismiss this with the long exposure excuse. They claim the exposure times were so slow that moving people simply disappeared from the image. But that explanation collapses when you see a horse standing still, or a flag waving, but no crowds. We are looking at ghost cities. These photos show massive urban centers built for millions, yet inhabited by only a few scattered survivors. You see dirt roads covering what should be cobblestones. You see a handful of people in ill-fitting clothes wandering through boulevards designed for giants, using horse-drawn carts that look like toys next to the Roman-style arches they pass under. This is the inheritor timeline. The population that built the star forts and the cathedrals was gone. The people we see in the 1850s were the survivors, or perhaps the repopulators, orphans sent on trains to fill empty cities they did not build. They were squatters in a palace, burning the furniture for heat because they didn't know how to turn on the central heating. This explains why we see primitive technology alongside advanced masonry. We didn't devolve, we just moved into a house we didn't know how to operate. And here is where it connects to the star forts. Many of these forts look sunken or surrounded by massive earthworks. We are told these are defensive berms, but look closely at the walls. They often continue down, deep into the earth. The star forts weren't built in the ground. They were buried by the ground. The moats are just the trenches where we dug them out. We are living on top of a buried world, and the people who took over after the reset didn't build these cities. They just moved into the upper floors. Look at the geometry. It's undeniable. This is a Chladni plate. When you play a specific sound frequency through it, the sand organizes itself into geometric patterns, stars, mandalas, fractals. Now look at the fortress of Palmanova in Italy, or Bortong in the Netherlands. Are we really supposed to believe that 17th century military architects accidentally designed structures that perfectly mimic the visual representation of sound frequencies? The official story is that these bastions eliminated blind spots for cannons, but any engineer will tell you sharp, intricate angles are the worst design for absorbing impact. A round wall deflects force. A flat wall absorbs it. A pointed, fractal wall concentrates the stress and shatters. These weren't built for war. They were built for water. Notice where every single major star fort is located. They are always near a river, a coast, or built directly over an aquifer. They are massive hydro-engineering machines. The moats were not stagnant ditches for defense. They were flow channels. The star shape maximizes the surface area of the water, creating a specific resonance or filtration system. Some researchers believe they were vibrating the water to structure it, to energize it, or even to generate power from the etheric field of the Earth itself. The water was the fuel. The star was the engine. To understand how this engine worked, you have to look at what they removed from the rooftops. If you look at etchings from before 1800, every major star fort and cathedral tower was capped not with a cross, but with a complex metal antenna. These were often copper or gold-plated poles, sometimes topped with spheres containing mercury or radium, substances known for their potent electromagnetic properties. These weren't religious symbols, they were conductors. The entire system functioned as an atmospheric etheric harvester. The star shape of the fort acted as a lens to focus the Earth's magnetic vibration. The water in the moat acted as a storage medium or battery. And the central tower, usually a cathedral or obelisk, acted as the transmitter. We see the remnants of this in the massive fireplaces found in these old buildings. Have you ever noticed that the fireplaces in castles and star forts are big enough to stand in, yet have no soot marks? They often don't even connect to a chimney. That's because they weren't for burning wood. They were ionization points. They contained metal plates that radiated heat and light, pulled directly from the atmospheric charge gathered by the roof antennas. When the grid was shut down, the antennas were stripped. The mercury was removed. The fireplaces were bricked up or converted to burn coal. The free energy system was dismantled and replaced with the metered, combustion-based grid we pay for today. When the reset happened, the new inhabitants found these massive machines. They didn't know how to turn them on. They didn't know what they were for. So they drained the water, put cannons on the walls, and called them forts. They took a silenced power plant and turned it into a primitive bunker. And because they wrote the history books, we believed them. If you look at one star fort, you see a defensive structure. But if you look at all of them, you see a circuit board. We are told that in the 1600s and 1700s, the world was divided by warring empires. The French, the Spanish, the Dutch, the Russians. They were all enemies, fighting for control, guarding their secrets. So why did every single one of these enemies build the exact same specialized technology at the exact same time, using the exact same sacred geometry? Imagine if the US and the Soviet Union during the Cold War both built their nuclear bunkers using identical blueprints down to the millimeter. It doesn't happen. Enemies don't share their most advanced military architecture unless they weren't building them, unless they were just occupying them. When you map these structures, they don't follow the logic of colonial expansion. They follow the logic of a grid. They are spaced at regular intervals, often aligned with specific magnetic latitudes. We see telegraph lines appearing on maps in the mid-1800 setas, often running directly between these forts. We are told these were primitive optical telegraphs. But were they? Or were the new inhabitants simply restringing the wires of an existing atmospheric energy grid? The sheer number of these forts, thousands of them, many supposedly built in remote locations with no strategic value, suggests their primary purpose wasn't war. It was connectivity. They weren't defending borders. They were maintaining a frequency, a global resonance that kept the old world connected until someone pulled the plug. But simply pulling the plug wasn't enough. The physical evidence had to be destroyed in a way that wouldn't raise suspicion. Enter the phenomenon of the World's Fairs of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Chicago, St. Louis, San Francisco, Buffalo. We are told that for these events, governments built massive, neoclassical cities of marble and stone, temples larger than the Parthenon, domes that rivaled St. Peter's, only to tear them all down 6 months later because they were made of plaster and hemp. Does that make any sense to you? The sheer labor required to build the 1893 Chicago World's Fair would bankrupt a modern nation. The engineering of the lagoons, the electric lighting which stunned the world, the intricate statuary, all temporary. The alternative theory is far more chilling. These cities weren't built for the fairs. They were the last remaining pristine centers of the star civilization. The World's Fair was the cover story for their systematic removal. They invited the public in to marvel at the new architecture, established a narrative that we built this, and then, under the guise of the fair ending, they used heavy machinery to erase the evidence. They were lost to fire, like in Chicago, or dismantled for parts. It was a symbolic act, showing us the greatness of the past, telling us it was just a temporary illusion, and then clearing it away so we would go back to building with wood and brick. So, where did they go? If these were the power nodes of a global civilization, why aren't they running today? Because in the late 19th century, a massive effort was launched to decommission them. They called it modernization. They called it urban expansion. In Vienna, in Paris, in Copenhagen, governments suddenly decided that these obsolete walls were limiting their cities. They spent decades tearing down the very infrastructure that defined them. They couldn't remove all of them. The foundations were too deep. The geometry was too perfect. So they hid them in plain sight. They turned the moats into parks. They turned the citadels into tourist sites or museums. They placed statues of their generals on top of our ancestors' technology. We are the inheritors of a silent machine. We are living in the remnants of a civilization that understood resonance, water, and energy in ways we are only just beginning to rediscover. The history books tell us we are at the peak of evolution, that we climbed out of the mud and built skyscrapers. But the evidence is still there, burying the first floors of our past. And the skyscrapers, they are just glass boxes sitting on top of star-shaped generators we forgot how to activate. Here's my challenge to you. Don't take my word for it. Open Google Earth. Look at your own city. Look for the radial streets that converge on a park or a historic hill. Look for the massive stone walls that serve no defensive purpose. Zoom out. Find the star. They changed the maps. They emptied the archives. They renamed the nations. But they couldn't scrub the geometry from the Earth itself. Once you see the pattern, everything changes.